Welcome to the RotoWire WNBA show, where we talk about fantasy basketball. Today is Friday, May 17th. I'm Jason Shabilsky alongside Kieran Sprecher. Today, we'll break down the latest news from around the league, including injuries to Natasha Howard and Jaylen Brown. We'll also talk about what we've learned from the first few days of the regular season and give some must add players for season long fantasy leagues. And we'll preview this weekend's games and talk about what we'll be looking for. Those looking to use RotoWire's full slate of tools can visit rotowire.com/WNBA. And please like and subscribe to our Twitter and YouTube platforms wherever you may be watching today. All right, the start of the regular season is finally here. It's been very exciting over the past few days, but we've had some discouraging news also come out, especially out of Dallas. Not only are they down Satu Sabali through the Olympic break, but they'll now be without Natasha Howard for 3 to 6 weeks and Jaylen Brown for 1 to 2 weeks. They've signed Monique Billings to a hardship contract, and Maddie Siegrist, Lou Lopez Seneschal, and Kalani Brown could also see increased work over the next few weeks. Kieran, for fantasy purposes, how are you approaching Dallas in the wake of the recent news?
Honestly, I was super excited for some sleeper slash breakout performances from Dallas during the regular season open, given the preseason injury to Sabali. But it didn't really happen. Wale dominated the production, right? 25 points. She got up 23 shots, 7 assists, 3 steals. McCowan and Howard did their part in the front court too. Obviously, you just mentioned the Howard injury too. So now they're down another like sizable front court player that they were going to rely on for a lot of production. In the opener, Siegrist popped for 13 points off the bench in 18 minutes. Her stat line and her fantasy numbers looked a lot better because she got a trio of blocks late in that game, which was kind of like unexpected. Until then, it was just like points. And the limited minutes, like you can't really expect that to be like maintainable, right? Like scoring 13 points in 18 minutes just isn't really sustainable. But Siegrist should have more minutes now that Howard is joining Sabali and Brown on the injured list. They just keep going. Kalani Brown, Lou Lopez, Seneschal, JC Sheldon, Uzin, who we're going to talk about in a little bit, Stephanie Soares, are all worth looks in fantasy, but that's a long list of names, right? So all of those names are going to be competing for playing time, and it might not even be that much playing time, even though there are a lot of injuries. So ultimately, I just think all of these injuries in Dallas just means more usage for Wale and McCowan. So if you drafted them, good luck. And Monique Billings, we'll see if she plays this weekend. We'll also touch on that later. But like Billings just gets added to that list of names that I said that are just going to be competing for bench minutes. So I feel like with all of that competition, there's just like not one player that's going to stand out as like the must-have add from Dallas.
This Dallas team was a team that I was looking at as a fringe playoff team, and now the Natasha Howard news maybe bumps them down. But even during the game when they were pretty healthy, it was pretty disappointing because they have lots of talent. And I think some of that can be attributed to just how impressive Chicago looked. The Sky lost a substantial amount of talent during the offseason, but they really didn't look overmatched Wednesday, even with the strong front court tandem of McCowan and Howard. I thought that especially with the Sky losing their top 2 rebounders from a year ago, that the Wings would just dominate the boards and be able to pull away. But really, the Sky looked to be in control for most of that game. They led by double digits at some points, and outside of the final minute or two, when the Wings came back, it looked like the Sky were on track to win this game, which was pretty surprising. So I was really as a Chicagoan, I was impressed to see what the Sky did, especially under first year coach Teresa Weatherspoon. But it'll be interesting to see whether they can keep it up. There have also been several surprises early in the regular season, including, as you mentioned, Sevgi Uzun in the Wings starting lineup. Kieran, is she someone you're targeting in your fantasy leagues?
So we kind of alluded to it earlier. She's for sure worth a look, right? Like if you need backcourt depth. She's definitely worth like looking and adding and playing. She wasn't just a token starter in the regular season opener, right? She played 27 minutes. But I don't expect like major production from Uzin like going forward. As mentioned, Agumbawale is going to dominate the ball. She's going to get up most of the shots. She's also going to be the lead playmaker, and it won't leave much left over for Uzin. Uzin made a couple of threes. She had 3 assists, but then also 3 turnovers. So not like an ideal performance. But like I said, if you're getting 27 minutes, numbers will start to add up eventually. However, I feel like JC Sheldon will probably, she didn't play that, the rookie out of Ohio State didn't play that much in the opener, but I feel like she'll start to steal minutes away from Uzin, especially if Uzin continues to have, a negative assist to turnover ratio, which is the key stat that I look for in point guards. And Uzin, for all intents and purposes, is like technically the point guard, except like I said, Agumbawale will handle most of the playmaking leagues. So overall, I'm picking Uzin up in leagues, and I have picked her up in a couple of leagues where I need short-term help at guard, but I'm not treating her as like a must-hold player. Like any free agents that like, or like as a must-hold player, because like any player that pops up, like I want to add, and I wouldn't be afraid of like dropping Uzin for like the next player that steps up because of injuries. How about you, Jason? Any free agents you're targeting after the first handful of games?
Yeah, so the first two nights of games had 2 triple doubles. The first one was pretty expected. Alyssa Thomas, she was a triple double machine last year. It was no surprise to see her do it on opening night. But Layshia Clarendon, a guard from the Sparks, really impressed me with her performance in the regular season opener. She posted a triple double. It was the first of her career. It wasn't particularly flashy in any particular area. It was 11 points, 10 rebounds, 10 assists. So just coming over that benchmark. But it's still a triple double. And I'm not expecting Clarendon to have that level of success every game, but she was very involved and is available in plenty of ESPN fantasy leagues, just around 10% rostered at this point. She started in every appearance for Los Angeles last year, and she averaged 11.1 points, 3.4 assists, and 3 rebounds, which are pretty respectable fantasy numbers. I was a little bit concerned for her this year, now that the Sparks have Verkia Jackson, Cameron Brink, even though they aren't guards like Clarendon is. I just wasn't sure how the playing time would work out, but Clarendon and Kia Nurse had starting roles, and both of them performed well. So I think that at least early in the season, Clarendon is at least worth a streaming look for you.
Would totally agree, especially like going into the season, the Sparks were going to be a rebuilding team. So they're one of the teams that we were targeting as like someone's going to have to step up, right? And so after a performance like that, she's going to keep getting opportunities until that production drops off. So fantasy managers should should add her and then should continue starting her and playing her, until things go the other way. I'm really interested in Tasha Harris, guard for the Sun. I think she needs to be rostered in all leagues. I think both of us kind of projected Mariah Jefferson to probably move into the starting lineup in her first season. She had been a productive player for other teams, but she's been dealing with an ankle injury. She was cleared for the regular season opener, but she only played 4 minutes, and she's listed as questionable for this weekend's games. So while Jefferson is sidelined, Harris should be rostered in all leagues and starting whenever she's playing. She scored 16 points on 11 shots. She was 4 for 6 from 3 in the opener, which isn't really like sustainable, but she shot 46% from 3 last year. So there's not going to be a huge drop off. You can expect her to be around a 45% 3-point shooter, and she should get a lot of looks playing alongside some strong front court players in Connecticut, right? Harris hasn't been a regular starter in her career, so we don't really know what to expect from her in terms of her peripheral stats, right? But if she's playing 30 minutes a game, like we said, the stats will just start to accumulate when you're out there that long. Obviously, the key here is monitoring Jefferson's health and usage going forward, but until Jefferson's minutes start to tick up, Harris has to be playing and be rostered in fantasy leagues.
Yeah, absolutely. Harris was a pleasant surprise in the opening night matchup, and sticking in the Sun backcourt, I also like adding Dejanay Carrington. She had a strong opening night performance and warrants picking up where she's still available. I believe that she is more rostered than Harris is, but if Carrington is available, she definitely warrants consideration. She had 16 points, 5 rebounds, 2 steals, and an assist in 31 minutes against Indiana. Her minutes could decrease slightly if the Sun incorporate Mariah Jefferson more. Like you mentioned, both Harris and Carrington could see their minutes drop a little bit, but Carrington looks to be the top guard option on a Connecticut roster that's pretty talented and figures to be in contention in most of the games that they play. So I'm excited to see Carrington's potential in really all areas.
For sure. Next up, I'm going with the only I gotta add about Carrington too. She cramped up a little bit, so she had to go to the bench, but that was because she was just hounding Caitlin Clark and then hitting shots on the both ends. I don't know who was on the broadcast, but they coined the term like this was a calf-worthy performance or like a cramp-worthy performance. Sorry, like she deserves to take a little bit of a break because she was balling out, and I expect that to continue. You know, once you like start a season like that, you can kind of carry that momentum in. I'm going back to the front court. We always need help in the front court, right? We're going to probably talk about that a lot on this show. Stephanie Dolson, center for the Mystics. She came over from New York this offseason, and her first game was against her old team. She started and played 27 minutes, scored 12 points, added 5 boards, 2 assists. She made 2 threes. There might have been a little bit of a revenge factor here, you know, like playing against your old team, we're going to give you the ball a couple extra times. She was not afraid to let it fly from deep. She took 6 threes on the night. I think as long as she's starting next to Shakira Austin, who's also a little bit limited, only played 20 minutes in the opener, she's probably going to continue playing through a hip injury, but she might not be seeing 30 minutes. Another reason why Dolson is a good option for now. Dolson's probably like a short-term option, because I think Aaliyah Edwards, the rookie out of Connecticut, will eventually start to steal some minutes away from Dolson. But like I said, until that happens, we should have Dolson in our lineups.
Yep, I totally agree. Dolson is someone that is worth taking a look at. Going back to the backcourt, Rebecca Allen, guard from Phoenix, also saw plenty of work in opening night. Similar to what I said with Clarendon, Allen is someone who was kind of on the fantasy radar heading into the regular season, but the Mercury were another team that held its own against a tough opponent to begin the season, and Allen was a big reason for the team's success. She had 14 points, 7 rebounds, 2 assists, and 2 steals in the block in 33 minutes against a really tough Aces squad, and she showed that she belongs on this new look Mercury roster. Allen has never averaged double-digit points in a season, so that could drop, and her rebounds will likely decrease once Brittany Griner is healthy. Over the past 3 seasons, Allen has averaged just 3.3 rebounds per game. But she's someone to strongly consider adding, even if it's just as a streaming option at this point. You could do a lot worse with streaming options than a player of Rebecca Allen's caliber. So even if she's able to just maintain some semblance of salvageable production, I would take it at this point.
Yeah, 33 minutes, and she's talented. She can do a little bit of everything. Definitely a must roster player. I got one more free agent waiver pickup that I'm looking at, but then we should get to David C's question. Thanks for chiming in, David. So I'm Natasha Mack, center for the Mercury. She got a spot start in place of Brittany Griner, who's going to miss a couple weeks with a broken toe. This was a very surprising move by Phoenix. She kind of held her own. She played only 20 minutes in the opener. They were facing the Aces, so she was going up against Asia Wilson, going up against the perennial defensive player of the year, perennial MVP candidate. She held her own, 6 boards, 5 assists, 3 blocks, and a steal. I don't think Mac is going to like break the scoreboard. I don't think she's going to be a 20 and 10 player, but as long as she's playing 20, 25 minutes and she's accumulating defensive stats like this, she is an option, a short-term option for players that need front court depth. When Griner returns, obviously Mac's role is going to diminish entirely, so don't count on her to be a starter for months, you know, but maybe a couple weeks of production we can get out of her.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, David had a really good question. It's how useful can Haley Jones be even when Jordan Canada is back, and when will that be? So one thing that's kind of been overshadowed by the Wings news is the news out of Atlanta with Jordan Canada's hand injury. Haley Jones took on a starting role, and Jones was a really productive college player. She was one of my sleeper picks last year, but she didn't really see enough playing time. But if she can see enough minutes early in the season, I really like her potential. She, in the opening night performance, she had 14 points, 4 assists, and 2 rebounds and a steal, also a block. That was just in 24 minutes. I think that Haley Jones and Crystal Dangerfield will kind of split the load in the backcourt, but it looks to be Haley Jones's job to lose in terms of starting. Now, with the Canada injury, we don't really have a timetable for her return. She was questionable ahead of the regular season opener, obviously didn't play. If I had to guess, it'll be something where she continues to be listed as questionable ahead of the next few games. But the Dream haven't really released a timetable for her return. It could be a week, it could be a little bit more than that. I'm hoping that she's back sometime in late May or early June, but really that's just kind of speculation at this point. And we really haven't heard much out of Atlanta in terms of that injury.
Yeah, exactly. It was kind of a surprise injury, and it was kind of like they reported it as like a minor thing, like, oh, she'll be fine, questionable. But now it's kind of starting to look like it's trending toward maybe a week or multi-week absence, which is concerning. Um, Haley Jones can be super useful when Canada's gone. When Canada comes back, I don't think there's going to be a ton of room for Jones. But you should continue to play Jones while you still can. She played only 30 minutes 4 times last year, and in those games, she averaged 12 points, 5.5 boards, 5 assists, and a steal, and she shot 43% from deep. So, once she's getting minutes, this is a player that you can trust. And like Crystal Dangerfield is like the other addition to this, but we kind of thought that Crystal was a response to the Canada injury, right? I think Atlanta was like, okay, we're gonna move Canada, like Canada's out, so she moves to the bottom of the depth chart. Haley Jones goes to the starting, and then we have Crystal Dangerfield as potential backup, like depth emergency option. So I think once Canada comes back, maybe Jones and Dangerfield like compete for the backup spot, but I still feel like would be Jones's job to lose. So for right now, I think you have a number one, and then when Canada comes back, you probably have a backup point guard.
Yeah, even last year, Jones started just 6 games, and obviously Canada wasn't there, but Jones averaged 14.6 minutes per game. So if she can improve her per minute efficiency during year two, I think that she's still a serviceable name to watch, even when Jordan Canada eventually returns to the court.
For sure. Thank you for
Mhm.
chiming in, David.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much. One last must add player that we're looking at heading into the first weekend of the season is Maddie Siegrist, forward for the Wings. We've talked about the Wings a lot today, and really for good reason, because the Natasha Howard news is pretty significant. But Maddie Siegrist was impressive in the regular season opener, even with Howard available. And Siegrist is only 10% rostered. So I'm adding her wherever I can. I'm also monitoring Monique Billings over the next few games to see how she's integrated into the team. And it's possible we talk about Billings as a pickup at some point. She was someone who was kind of a surprise cut by the Sparks, but it's good to see her laying back on a roster so quickly.
Yeah, I think I talked about it enough earlier with all of those players in Dallas. It's going to be hard for one to stand out. And I think it'll be like a game to game basis. And for the next game or two, I would roll with Siegrist over for the rest of them. But then in the long term, I probably want JC Sheldon as like the player that could emerge out of that group. But I for right now, Siegrist definitely based off of what she did on the opener for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of intriguing options, but a lot of unknowns as well. Another chance to see this year's fantasy landscape come into focus will be this weekend, as every team is playing. let's run through one question that we have for each team. So, uh, starting us off with the Washington Mystics, they play tonight. How much does Shakira Austin's playing time rise this weekend as the Mystics play two games? She played, I believe, 18 minutes during or maybe 20
20
during,
minutes, I think.
yep, 20 minutes during the opening night matchup. She's probable again, still dealing with her residual hip injury from last season and the offseason. But I think that two variables to come into play this weekend will be number one, if her minutes limit increases at all. And number two, with two games in 3 days, will the Mystics continue to be especially careful in that regard? So she was productive when she was on the court on Tuesday, but if she can see her playing time rise, she's been one of the players that we've been really excited about during the offseason.
I'm kind of upset I didn't look up her per 36 minutes before we hopped on here, but 13 points, 5 blocks, and 11 shots in 20 minutes. Those per 36 numbers got to be pretty exciting. So hopefully she gets a boost in minutes sometime soon. So moving on to who Washington is playing tonight, and I think you mentioned that's the Connecticut Sun. We have another player that we're monitoring who's on a minutes limit, and that's Brianna Jones. Like Shakira Austin, Brianna Jones was efficient and effective in her only 19 minutes. She scored 8 points, had 3 steals and a block. But she's coming off an Achilles injury, and she's only played 14 games since 2022. So unlike Austin, I don't probably see Brianna Jones moving up to like 25, 28 minutes anytime soon. She'll probably be limited to under 25 minutes for the next few games. But she's effective when she's out there, so you should continue to have her in her lineups. But that's definitely the main story for Connecticut right now, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. Connecticut is a team that should be in the hunt for a title this year, and I'm excited to see what they can do.
Yeah, definitely. The late night game today is Seattle Storm versus the Minnesota Lynx. On the Minnesota side, I'm monitoring 3 players that I think are competing for like probably like the 5th option on the depth chart / like the 6-player role. I'm monitoring Diamond Miller, Bridget Carlton, and Natasha Heidemann. Miller started but only played 13 minutes. Carlton played 26 minutes off the bench and was pretty effective in those minutes. And Heidemann played 15 minutes off the bench. So I feel like it'll be a matchup sort of deal until Dorka comes back, obviously, which we don't really know when that's going to be. So it'll be interesting to see how these 3 players how their playing time evens out and where they wind up on the depth chart. And like Jason said, like this is the time to be monitoring that stuff super closely and to see what kind of trends will come out. On the other side for the Storm, we talked about this during our preseason show. Victoria Vivians was the 5th starter for the Storm. I'm kind of surprised by that. She started again during the regular season opener. She played 22 minutes but was held scoreless. Jordan Horston played 23 minutes off the bench and produced. Sammy Whitcomb only played 12 minutes. Vivian's, I don't think like them losing to Minnesota in the opener was Vivian starting. Like I don't think that was the reason. It was mostly just because Jewel Lloyd and Skylar Diggins-Smith couldn't find the bottom of the bucket. But I do think Vivian's spot is it's not set in stone by any means. So I'll be interested to see if Seattle continues to struggle if they move her out of the starting lineup or not. Moving on. Go ahead.
Seattle was one of my surprise overall teams from opening night. I was surprised just to see how flat they fell against Minnesota, and Minnesota looked to be in control for most of that game. And so I'm intrigued to see if Seattle can turn it around this weekend.
Yeah, I've been monitoring the line on DraftKings too. For our best bets article that'll be coming out later today, you can check that out. Jason absolutely dominated the field last year, and we're off to a pretty good start this year. But Minnesota, they're playing again tonight after they played on Tuesday, and Minnesota was 2-point home dogs. I thought that was kind of surprising. It went up to 2.5. It's currently at plus 1.5. Minnesota they've been playing together for a while. I know they added Courtney Williams and Alana Smith, but like Collier and McBride, this group has been together. Seattle's hasn't really played together at all. So I don't really see them like having a major changeover from Tuesday. So I'm riding the Lynx tonight for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so enough talk about Friday. Moving on to Saturday, we got a big WNBA slate, a lot of action going on, and it's going to be kicked off at 1 p.m. Eastern with Caitlin Clark's third game. It hasn't been the best start for her so far. She's putting up decent fantasy numbers given the struggles and given how ugly it's looked at times. So my big question is, are we going to see the Caitlin Clark breakout this weekend? I think in order for that to happen, Alyssa Smith and Aaliyah Boston need to assert themselves. I feel like I'm not going to make a bunch of excuses for Clark. I think if you talk to her, she would say that she's struggling and she wouldn't put any of the blames on her teammates. But I think those two front court players need to assert themselves and make life a little bit easier for Clark so she isn't being triple teamed and being grabbed on every play, and make it feel like Clark doesn't have to do it all by herself. And if that can happen, I feel like Clark will start to get some more open looks. The ball will start to fall, and the Fever will just look more fluid as a team. So they're taking on the Liberty again. They just got blown out by the Liberty on Thursday night, and it's not going to be any easier, right? Like Clark's going to have a tough time going up against that starting five. Laney was absolutely a monster defensively during that game on Thursday. But my question for the Liberty, are any of their bench options going to become viable fantasy players this season? I just don't really see it. I think that starting lineup is going to play a bunch. You got Leonie Fibish from overseas. She's a sharp shooting forward. Ivana Dojkic. She played for Seattle. She got some good playing time for Seattle last year. Naria Sabuli, she can be a decent player. Kayla Thornton is a good defensive player. Kennedy Burke is a good defensive player. But like I mentioned with Dallas earlier, when I list 5 names for competing for one or two spots, that's not a good thing. That just means that they're all going to take away value from each other. How about the other games on Saturday?
Yeah, so just one more point about the Liberty. Sandy Brondello, the Liberty coach, didn't really rely on her bench too much last year, but she said recently that she hopes that she can get like all 11 players involved. So that would be really enticing because they have a lot of talent on the bench. So if any of them can become fantasy viable, that would be really good for fantasy managers. But yeah, switching over to the Aces and the Sparks. For the Aces, if Chelsea Gray remains out, can the rest of the team be more effective at stepping up? They played the Mercury on Tuesday, and outside of Asia Wilson, the Aces struggled for a lot of their game against Phoenix. They have a decently light opponent and are playing in Las Vegas on Saturday, but I'd still like to see a more complete 40 minutes, especially out of players like Kia Stokes and Layshia Clark. Can either of them step up and kind of fill that role if Chelsea Gray is out? And then for Los Angeles, they also looked impressive during their regular season opener. It was against Atlanta, but my question for them is how long will it be before Rakia Jackson becomes more involved, and also when that happens, who's playing time drops. So we talked about Layshia Clarendon earlier in the show. Kia Nurse also has a starting role, and so will one of their minutes drop? Will it be kind of a front court option? And also, can Cameron Brink stay out of foul trouble? She was limited to 20 minutes on Wednesday because she had 5 fouls. And that was really one of the biggest issues that she had in college. So if she can stay out of foul trouble, I really like her potential, but I think it'll be a bit of a learning curve, especially early on.
Yeah, I think we both thought that Rika Hamby starting over Rika Jackson was kind of surprising, but Hamby was absolutely fantastic in the opener with 20 points and 14 boards. So I think Rika Jackson's going to be kind of stuck in for a while, especially if Brink continues to play well and Hamby continues to play well.
Yeah, Dearica Hamby was one of the stars of that game. And if she can maintain some sort of that production, even when Rakia Jackson gets more involved, I really like that. She's a really intriguing fantasy option for me. So moving on to a rematch of the Sky in Dallas. They're staying in Dallas. For the Sky, they have a rematch against the Wings. So can Chicago maintain its momentum? The Wings will be without Natasha Howard and Jalen Brown this time around, and it's unclear just how much Monique Billings will be incorporated or even available. again, it was really impressive to see Natasha Howard, especially knowing what we know now. Natasha Howard was really effective, and if she was playing on a broken foot for even part of that game, like that's really that's like really impressive. But Chicago looked good on Wednesday before the final few minutes, so maybe the team can pick up its first win this weekend. And also, I think if Dana Evans can be more efficient, if shooting 20 after shooting 25% from the floor Wednesday, I think Chicago will absolutely be in the mix to win this game.
Yeah, we have already just expressed our fandom on the show. We are both Chicago Sky fans, so we're just kind of like happy that they're showing some fight so far this year. But that should be a winnable game. We've talked about Dallas for feels like half of this show. They're totally banged up, so this is a game that the Sky could and should win.
Yeah, absolutely. And moving on to the other side of the matchup, does Monique Billings play Saturday? And if so, how much? Howard had a lot of minutes, and she has had a lot of minutes throughout her career. So, how will the work be distributed between Billings, Maddie Siegrist, Lou Lopez Seneschal, Kalani Brown, even Stephanie Suarez? So, the Wings are one of the teams that I'll be watching the most on Saturday and Tuesday just to see how that plays out. And I think that we're going to get a lot of answers as Monique Billings joins the team, and we'll see how the playing time shakes out.
Be sure to check out rotowire.com/WNBA for all those updates. We'll have you covered. So for the final game on Saturday, we got Phoenix against Atlanta. My question for Phoenix is, can Natasha Mack hold her own against Tina Charles? Like I said, when highlighting Mack for my free agent pickups, she was decently productive against Asia Wilson. Life doesn't get any easier for her because now she has to go up against Tina Charles, who showed no signs of her age, no signs of slowing down in her first game back, absolutely dominated. So Phoenix has a lot of scores: Copper, Taurasi, Sophia Cunningham, Rebecca Allen, sharpshooters, but they need a presence down low to kind of like make things easier for all of those offensive oriented players. And that's Mac's job right now with Griner out. So Mac has to go another tough matchup, but we'll see if she can hold her own against Tina Charles.
Yeah. And on the other side of the matchup for Atlanta, I have two questions about them. So, will Alicia Gray look more like she did last year, and will Aerial Powers be more involved? Alicia Gray had a breakout season last year during her debut year in Atlanta, but on Wednesday she had just 12 points, 3 rebounds, and a block. So it was a little bit underwhelming. She's displayed her talent in the past, but I'd really like to see more from her, especially if Jordan Canada remains out. Once Canada's back in action, she'll naturally see a lot of backcourt usage. So I'd like to see Gray get into a rhythm, especially if Jordan Canada is out this weekend, because that'll just help her to continue her momentum throughout the season. And also, Aerial Powers was limited to just 12 minutes. So that makes me wonder if her role this year will look like it did in 2023, where her playing time kind of fell off a cliff in Minnesota, or if it'll look like the prior seasons where she was a really reliable option. So I'm intrigued about a lot of players in Atlanta, but it was a little bit of a disappointing performance for some of them in Long Beach on Wednesday.
Absolutely. That game started off super slow for Atlanta. Atlanta is one of my breakout teams for second straight year. I bet they're over of 19 wins on DraftKings for our best futures play on article. Be sure to check that out too. But like you said, that game they tied the first 3 quarters at 26, at 22, and then 18. So it was a tied game going into the fourth quarter, and the Dream just weren't really like connecting against the new look rebuilding Sparks, and it was kind of discouraging. And then they just blew them out in the fourth quarter. So you hope that fourth quarter kind of leads to some momentum going into this game too, and hopefully the Dream can stack some W's and clear that over 19 wins by the halfway mark. But yeah, a lot of super exciting stuff going on this weekend. We'll be back Monday for to break that all down for you. It's just an exciting time in the W right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep, like you said, back Monday at 1 p.m. Central. We'll talk about what we learned from the weekend, give you probably some more ads and maybe some players that you can move on from as the season starts up. But thanks for joining us, and we'll see you Monday.